everybody. Welcome back to Conversations in Ken's Cafe. We have a special guest with us, Mr. Dave Dormer, who was, a news man in his younger career, and he's still young. He still has that baby cheeks, right? But Dave, tell us a little bit more about who Dave is and how you got to be a cannabis advocate doing events in Calgary.
Well, hello, welcome, or not welcome, but thanks for having me. So I have been, one of the things I like to say during my tours is I have been a journalist for the last 24 years. I've been a stoner for the last 22. I put those two things together and I made Kananaskis. Cannabis has always been a huge part of my life. It's something that I've loved ever since the first time that I tried it when I was a teenager, and journalism is something else that I love. I love storytelling. I love getting to the truth of things, finding out, what really happened, what is the real story there. And so over the years, as I've used cannabis, I've done a lot of research on it. And you just, because you sit around, you talk to your friends and you're like, hey, when was the first time you smoked weed? And it's like, when was the first time anybody smoked weed? Like, how did they smoke weed? How did this all come about? And then you start looking into it because you can figure it out and trace everything backwards. And then once it went legal, one of my first thoughts was, because the thing about me is I've always said, if I can't work in journalism, I want to work in weed. And journalism for the last 10 years has been a contracting business. There's been layoffs. There's no money left in journalism. It's still a great profession. I'm a journalism instructor as well at SAIT. That's my day job. I always said if journalism goes south and I ever get laid off, I want to work in weed. And so when it was going to go legal, I have a lot of contacts from BC. That's where I'm from, and I thought, well, maybe I'll open up a dispensary. I have a cousin. She has a license to grow. For medical side, and she grows organic and does all that. And so I thought, maybe I'll open up sort of a boutique organic store. And then I started seeing a lot of the dollars that were involved in the startups and the stores and the hurdles. And I thought, okay, that's not it. And
too much paperwork.
Oh yeah. Well, it's like you need millions of dollars. And I didn't have that. And then actually the year before, so December of 2017, me and my now fiance, we went down to Mexico to it's this festival called Closer to the Sun. There's a band called Slightly Stupid puts it on every year. And it's basically, instead of buying a ticket to a festival, you buy a room at an all-inclusive, and the bands are at the all-inclusive, and it's just a week of music and awesomeness. So in December of 2017, we're there. And it's 99% Americans. We're the Canadians, and all anybody wanted to talk to us about was, "Hey, you guys are going to get legal cannabis. That's coming up." So we're at an all-inclusive resort in Mexico, and I'm spending the entire week talking to people about how cannabis is going to go legal. And I say to myself, "Hey, why don't we open up an all-you-can-smoke? Like everybody goes to Mexico to drink for a week and sit in the sun. People could come here. I could, you charge them for a week." And so I start putting it in my head. I'm like, all right, we're going to need a building. We're going to need insurance. We're going to need staff. We're going to need a supply of cannabis. Like, we're going to have to do activities and this. And I was putting it together in my head all week. And then we actually went on one of the excursions. We went snorkeling and ziplining one day. And we get in the van and the guy turns around. He goes, "Welcome to my office." And I just a light bulb went off in my head. And I'm like, I don't need a hotel. I need a van. And then actually it was literally as I was sitting there, I heard a voice in my head or something, and it said, "People are not going to come to Calgary to use cannabis, but they are going to come to see the Rocky Mountains and use cannabis." And that's what I facilitate. And so right from there, I was like, okay, I got an idea. So I started percolating that in my head. And I thought, okay, when people come to Calgary, I'm going to take them. I'll take them to see an LP, and then I'll take them to a store. They can see where cannabis is grown. I can take them to a store. They can buy some. I'll drive them out to the mountains, to the coolest smoke spot they've ever seen in their lives. I'll serve them lunch. And my knowledge of being a researcher, I know the real history of cannabis. And so I started putting this stuff together. I spent a year going through the FOIT process, and then I actually got the court record of the first Canadian that was busted as a dealer. I found a copy of the. His name was George Charbonneau. It was December 7th, 1937. December 4th, 1937. He was arrested at the Windsor border. The RCMP did a sting on him, and that was sort of the start of basically prohibition, hardcore prohibition in Canada.
Yeah,
it had already been illegal for like 9 years, but we didn't do anything about it. So I have these stories. I have a copy of Emily Murphy's book, The Black Candle. That's one of the reasons why cannabis was made illegal in Canada. I have a copy of the Shenan Ben Kaojing, which is the oldest book that mentions cannabis that's ever been published. It's from 2700 BC. Obviously, I have a modern printing of that book.
Well, unless you've got a vault in the back room and very special air conditioning. And
yes, but
that's your cannabis grow, right? That's air conditioning in your cannabis grow.
Oh yeah,
temperature, humidity, right?
Yeah, but I have all these things, just stuff I've collected, and I have. Yeah. And I thought, people would like to see this, and I can tell stories of like, this is where cannabis is from. And then I ended up writing a piece because as we were leading up to Prohibition, or the end of Prohibition, there was a lot of stories. And of course, government's going to come out and tell you how bad this is for you. Like, it's going to be legal, but it's bad. And so they kept talking about the rise in overdoses and the increasing number of overdoses. And they kept using this word overdose. And I'm like, you can't use the word overdose when you're talking about cannabis because it's not possible.
Doesn't happen.
Exactly. And so I was working at the CBC, and I went to my bosses and I said, quit. I put out an email. I was like, quit doing these stories and stop saying this bullshit because it's wrong. And they were like, okay, well, if you're so smart, tell us the truth. And so I wrote a piece called why you can't use the word overdose when it comes to cannabis. And I went to a Dr. Eddie Lang. He is the head of emergency medicine in Calgary. And Dr. Brian Hill, he works at U of C as in the neuroscience department. I had them explain why you cannot overdose on cannabis. There is a thing called cannabis hyperemesis syndrome that it can fuck you up a little bit.
Greening out.
Yes, that is possible, but you can't call it an overdose. And that piece, that story, that got a lot of traction. Happily, that went a little bit viral. And then I had the folks at Boaz. They used to be a licensed producer here in Calgary. They were about to open. Right. They saw that piece and they called me up and said, hey, we saw your piece. We really liked it. We liked what you're all about. We'd like you to come down and tour our facility before we open. And so, of course, I am all over that. Well, I went down and I walked into the mother room. Dave Isaac, he was the owner of Boaz, took me in the mother room. Him and Bill was a master grower. And it just, the feeling of like, this is where I want to be. And I thought, I want to do these tours and it's an LP. So I literally handed Dave my card and I said, can I take you for coffee? And he was like, sure. And we went out and had lunch a couple days later. And I just said, hey, look, I want to do tours. Can I do tours in your facility? And he was like, sure. It was that easy.
Okay. Now let's stop there because we talk a lot about IPM issues. That guy's one shit big IPM issue. I mean,
but this is the thing. Dave was all for it. Dave was like, I said, do you want to do tours? He's like, yeah, sure, let's do it. And he's like, you know what you're doing? And I was like, oh, 100%. And I go home and Google, like, how do you run a business doing tours? But I mean, it was like, let's do this. And so, but then as soon as we started trying to move forward, Health Canada was like, you want to do what? You want to bring strangers in? Like, no, they blew their mind. The big thing was his insurance companies. They were like, you want to do what? Like,
you want to have all these people walk through a business? No. You can't do that.
The stop loss became hundreds of thousands of dollars for insurance. And, Dave just looks at me. He's like, so you paying that or what? And I was like, but I knew, I'm like, I still have an idea. And so I pivot. I still had, and then the name actually came to me because I went through all these names of, Canada High Tours and all the sort of the cliche names. And I'm thinking, and as a journalism instructor, I always tell my students, if you want a really good name, it's got to have it's got to be a bookender. It's got to have two meanings, two uses. And I'm like, where, and get that. And all of a sudden, I just, again, this voice came into my head and it just went, Kananaskis. Because I'm taking people to Kananaskis, and I'm like, Kananaskis. Oh my God. And I just like, holy crap. And so I Googled it.
It's hard to find your website because of Kananaskis.
Well, and that's it. And so, well, I Googled it and I thought, okay, does anybody have this name yet? No. And then when you start a business, you have to do the nuance search, which is to see if anybody else has a name. So I called my lawyer and I said, hey, does anybody else have this name? And next day he calls me back, nope, it's good, it's yours. And I'm like, register that. And it was, as soon as I had that name, it was like, I don't know what it was, but I'm like, everything fell into place. I'm like, I have a business. I have something here. Like that name,
synchronicity.
I have to have something. And then it was like, well, I can't take the people to an LP, but I can still take them to a store and I can still take them to the mountains. And I have a really good friend of mine, Desiree. She runs Butterfan Catering. And so I messaged her and I said, yo, Des, can you help me out with this? And she's like, I got you. And, so she made a charcuterie boards for me and they were unbelievable. I got more compliments on the charcuterie boards than I did on anything else. But I knew because when I made the tour, I made it for me. I made it for things. It's not just like, hey, give me some money and I'll drive you out to the, mountains and show you something crappy. Like I made stuff. I want a lunch that I would want to eat. I'm going to take you to a place that I would want to go to. I'm going to show you and tell you stories that I think are cool. And so like Des made this awesome charcuterie boards. And then I'm like, okay, now I need a store. So I literally put on, I had my, I actually, my fiance, a really good friend of hers, her name's Elizabeth Carey. She does Elizabeth Carey Designs. And I called her up and said, hey, I need a logo. And she sent me a bunch of things. We talked and she's like, this is your logo. And I was like, holy crap, that's it. So I had that. I got the social media going. And then I just put on Twitter one day, I need a store to partner with or work with to do my tours. Anybody out there? And Alina from 5 Point Cannabis, her and then Claire was running their social media, and Claire reached out to me and said, hey, we'll work with you. And it was one of those things is like, what are you doing? Like, we're in, what are you doing? And Alina has been like that, like since day one when we met. We both had the same sort of mindset where she was super, she's like, I just want to help local people. Like, you're a Calgary guy trying to do something in cannabis, I will help you. And so like, oh yeah, I have nothing but good things to say about 5 Point and the people there. So we started working together, and it was like, I can take people now to the store. I can then take them out to the mountains. So then I had a concept, and then we got that in the media. I had the Herald wrote a story about this new thing in the tours, and then that really got word out, and the tours booked right up. I guess backtracking a little bit, once we were ready to go, Friday, March 17th, 2020 was going to be the day that I was going to go and do an educational night at 5 Point Cannabis, and I was going to announce the tour, and we're going to see the people, and that was going to be my launch. And the week leading up to it, I was writing stories because I was still working at CTV, and I was writing stories about this new virus that was out, and I could see what was coming. I'm like, this is going to be bad, and I was telling them,
shit!
I'm like, this is like, we might get shut down, and she's like, oh, what are you talking about? I'm like, yeah, this is going to be bad. And it was that morning is when they declared COVID and everything closed. But I still launched, and I thought people are still doing it, because to me this was actually a blessing in disguise, because I'm an entrepreneur, if you want to call it that. I am a cannabis lover who wanted to expose other people to cannabis and normalize it. So I'm kind of fumbling my way through this new business thing. And when they shut the world down, it was like, I'm going to launch a business. Either I'm going to be successful in spite of COVID, or, well, I wasn't successful because of COVID. So, there was no downside for me. But then it got in the media, and I got a little bit of exposure, and it, not that it booked right up, but I was about 75% full. That made it a thing, and I really started doing it. And it was really going until the end of October in 2020. And all of a sudden, the snow hit. And it was like, oh, hey, do you want to go out to the mountains and eat lunch in the snow? And it's like, no. So, that's in my set. So I'm thinking, okay, well, I gotta pivot here again. And I'm becoming almost like a basketball player. I'm real good at pivoting after a year and a half of this, cannabis rules change. Okay, you got to do this. Oh, I can't go into
with the punches, we call it.
Now I got to do this. So I just thought, okay, well, what would people want to do in the winter? And the first thing that came into my head, dog sledding. I'll take them out to the mountains and we'll go dog sledding. And so I went out there and I went to the dog sledding place and they were like, you want to bring stoned people around our dogs? No. You're not doing that. And I was like, oh, okay. And then the other thing was, well, they can't drive. So I'd have to have a driver come for the dogs. I'd have to have somebody take it. So the costs were adding up. And I'm like, there's just going to be no money in it for me. And then I was like, okay, well, what else can I do? Horseback riding. All right. So I go to the horseback riding place and they're like, you want to bring people around our horses stoned? Like, no, zero chance of that. And then I thought, well, what about a horse sleigh ride? Mm-hmm. And so I went back out to them like, hey, can we do a horse sleigh ride? And they're like, yeah, we'll do that for you. And so it was going to be 45 minutes on a sleigh, but it's a 45-minute drive out to the mountains. And me, I'm doing what I want. I'm like, I don't want to drive 45 minutes in the car so I can sit for 45 minutes and then get 45 minutes back in the car. And I was like, so there's all these things. And I thought, okay, I need to have the sleighs in Calgary. And being a journalist, go through my contact list. They had, there's two places that do sleigh rides in Calgary, Heritage Park and Spruce Meadows. And so I went to both of them, approached them. First, I went to Spruce Meadows, and I had a really good relationship with them. I covered them for 10 years. I explained them all what I want to do. I said, like, this history of cannabis tour. I tell the real history. I take people out. They consume it. We have dinner. It's really nice. We do it on a sleigh ride. And they just, they stop, like, Dave, we love you. There is 0% chance of you bringing cannabis to Spruce Meadows. And so then I called up Heritage Park, and here's where life gets serendipitous. A couple of years earlier, my fiance, she is a chiropractor and a osteopathic therapist, or manual osteopathic therapist. And we went a couple of years back, we were at her Christmas party. And I don't really know anybody at the Christmas party. I'm there with her. And there's another guy at the Christmas party. His wife is one of the massage therapists. And I'm from Kamloops originally, and he was from Kamloops. And so, they're like, hey, well, you guys are both from Kamloops. You guys should hang out. And I had just started. This was 2020. I had just started Kananaskis. No, I was just gonna start Kananaskis. So this would have been 2017, I think. But we sat and chatted, and I was like, I'm gonna start my business, and I'm planning on doing this stuff. And I was telling them all about it. So fast forward a couple of years. And I called up the comms person for Heritage Park, and I said, hey, look, it's a real history tour. I tell the real history. It involves Emily Murphy. She's connected to Heritage Park. And she listened, and she goes, oh, hey, I'll tell you what, Dave. We just got a new CEO. So let me go talk to him. Let me run this by him and see what he says. So she goes and talks to him and says, hey, we got a guy named Dave who wants to do this history of cannabis tours. And he's like, I met that guy.
That's synchronicity, brother. I mean, you can't call it anything.
I had actually pitched him 2 years earlier on my event, and he's like, yeah, I'll give him a shot.
And you actually did it, you crazy fucker. Okay, come on, let's do this.
So we did. So Heritage Park, I mean, I cannot say enough good things about dealing with Heritage Park. They were so supportive of cannabis. They just said to me, yes, you know what? We will work with you. We will help you do what you want to do. It was events. They needed events because they were shut down as well.
True.
But they were brilliant to work with. And I was there for about a year and a half. And we would do dinners from the Selkirk Grill. The way it started was they said, yes, you can do wagon rides at Heritage Park. But they came to me and said, there's a caveat. You can't smoke on the wagon. And I was like, there's no other point of being on the wagon. Like, we're here to smoke cannabis. That's the whole point of the tour. And they're like, I'm like, how do we work around this? And they said, well, tell you what, we'll give you a fire pit. And so what we'll do 20 minutes on the wagon, then we'll sit you off at the fire pit. You guys can consume, then we'll put you back on the wagon and you go around and see the thing. And I thought, okay, again, doing what I want to do. Yeah. Can I ditch the wagon? I don't want to go back on the wagon. I just want to sit by the fire and smoke the weed. Can I just do that? And they were like, yeah, sure, if you want. And so I was like, okay, great. So we actually did that because the tour is out to the mountains where, I tell the story of cannabis. And so we did the first tour. I brought a group and I tell the story. But the problem, if you want to call it that, when I drive you out to the mountains, it's about 45 minutes to an hour drive out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
You are a captive audience in my van. So as we drive out, I'm telling you the story of cannabis, the history of cannabis.
That's bad, Dave. Come on. That's cruel and unusual punishment to teach people, and they can't get away from you.
Oh yeah. So, but I mean, it's very interactive and it's great and it works. So then we went to Heritage Park for the first time. We had the fire pit and everybody just kind of stood around, and I told the story of cannabis as I do. And my fiance, she's very stylish. So she kind of styles everything. And then she kind of watches and will say, hey, you had them here, you didn't have them here. This story worked out. You hit here, you didn't hit here.
Yeah.
And she just, and after we kind of deconstruct everything and we say, how'd that go? And she's like, it doesn't work. And she was honest with me. She's like, it didn't work. You didn't have them. Like, they're not a captive audience when we're standing there for 2 hours. So it's not a 2 hour, there was people
presentation. It's a 45-minute presentation.
Oh yeah. And so she's like, this don't work. And so I was like, okay, well, we need something else. So she came up with the idea. Well, we set up a table with all of the artifacts. I got a bunch more artifacts, and I've been collecting them all throughout. But then I went to Heritage Park and I said, can I serve dinner? And they were like, sure, yeah. Like I never heard a no from Heritage Park on anything I ever asked them. I was like,
you're using our facility, you're paying us. No, come on, keep people coming.
Oh yeah, that was what it was. It was never no. It was like, we'll figure out how to get to yes.
Yeah.
And so, I was like, can we do a table? Can I serve dinner? So it came at the end when we were doing Heritage Park, we would have dinner with linens and china from the Selkirk Grill. People could order their dinners ahead of time. They'd come. I tell you the story of cannabis. I have all the artifacts. You enjoy a dinner. You can sit and smoke. It's 3 hours long. I pick you up at 5 Point. You buy your cannabis. I drop you off back at 5 Point. It was a beautiful evening. I was like, we absolutely have something here. Yeah. But then AGLC got involved. And the problem is now, and so, when things are new, and there's the old saying, it's always better to ask for forgiveness than permission, or how that goes.
Of course, yeah. And get grandfathered in for stuff.
Because in the Calgary, there is a bylaw, a municipal bylaw. It's different in every single city in Canada. Yep. Each city gets to make its own rules for consumption. Calgary's rules are that you cannot consume in any publicly accessible space.
Yeah.
Heritage Park closes at 5 o'clock every day, and it is surrounded by a fence with security. I rent out Heritage Park for a private event. So in my mind, I was in favor of the bylaw, because we were renting out in a private event, having a private event in a private facility. There's no public access. And I am driving. The reason that Heritage Park allowed me to do it is because I would pick people up at 5 Point Cannabis, drive them onto Park. We would eat dinner. They could consume. I would drive them back off. There was no driving. And one kind of aside, they told me that was their real concern. And I said, well, you have a bar that I can go put my car in your parking lot and walk into your bar and sit there all day. You have no problem with any of that, but you have a problem with cannabis, which, we talk about all the stigma.
The stigma,
but that's why they allowed it. So it all worked. But then I got a call. They got a phone call from AGLC because High Times actually wrote a story about me. And so I started getting, a little bit of traction. And AGLC said, Heritage Park has a liquor license for the entire park. They have one liquor license for the whole park. So they can do events anywhere on park. When you have a liquor license, you cannot allow cannabis use. That is a violation of your liquor license. If you want to do that, you have to apply for the tent. Essentially, you have to get the cannabis exemption permit, which is the tent, which everybody knows is the tent they had at Full Fest. Right? Everybody knows about that. So essentially, to do my tours, was going to have to apply for a tent. It takes 90 days to go through the application process. And it was very onerous. So basically, to do any tour, I have to apply for the tent 90 days in advance. That doesn't work if you're selling public tours.
No.
So there's an application form on the city's website to get this permit. So I was in a bad mood because it essentially killed my business.
Yeah,
That happened,
basically.
you know, it was basically on. I was talking to Heritage Park. They tried. They, you know, they said we will work with you. We will try, but it came back down to they were going to have to basically lose their cancel their liquor license and reapply for one that they could parse. What would be one that they could then, but you know, Heritage Park doesn't have an interest in doing that for some guy that does private events. So you know, they said politely, "Sorry, bud." And so you know, I was furious that you know, once again, booze is getting in the way of cannabis, and I can't do my tours. There's nowhere now. Like cannabis consumption is not legal in Calgary. I take people out to the mountains because of that. There is no legal place for me to operate in Calgary. It's a legal product. It's been now legal for 2 years, and I can't legally operate. That's not fair, and I was pissed off. So I went on to the city's website, and it was a Sunday night, and I put on their application form, and it said, when you're applying for a cannabis exemption permit, describe your event. And I wrote, I described my event. I've been doing these tours at Heritage Park for the last 2 years. AGLC says I'm in violation of the liquor license. You guys don't have a license for me to operate. That's not fair. We need to talk. And I sent it in, and I just thought, my business is dead.
Yeah.
So what
can you lose?
And so this was a Sunday night, and I got an email back, and you get the auto reply, you know, thank you for replying to the city of Calgary, whatever. And so then about 30 minutes later, I got an email back, and it's from a guy, and it says, "Hi, Dave, I am your licensing, I have your file I'm your licensing guy. I will have your file. You will communicate through me. I just wanted to contact you. I'm going to contact you again tomorrow morning, and we can talk about this." And so I said, "Hey, bud, that's awesome. Nice to meet you." I sent him a link to my website. I gave him a description of what my tours is doing. I was like, "This is what I'm working on. This is what I'm doing. Here's all my stuff. Let's talk." The next morning, I get an email that says, "Dave, I love this. I'm going to help you." And you know, and I thought when I put this in, it was 50-50. I'm either going to get a bureaucrat or I'm going to get somebody that's on side. And I got a guy. I mean, I cannot say enough good things. I know a lot of people like to crap on the city and they like to crap on bureaucrats, but I got a guy named Jacob, and he is amazing to deal with. You know, and we started talking, and you know, because the city's philosophy and his policy and the city's policy is they want events, they want people doing things, and it's just like Heritage Park. We're at no now, but how do we get to yes? And so we started working together, and we actually had a meeting, and I was figuring out where can I do my tours in Calgary, and so I needed to find a park space. You know, all those little green spaces around the city, you can actually rent those out. And I was looking at doing them, and we were starting putting together applications. And it was actually Jacob that came to me, and he says, "Hey, look, I found a space for you. It's too big for you to do tours there because my tours only are up to 10 people at a time. So, you know, there's not a lot of profit margin and there's not a lot of money involved." And so, you know, he goes, "Listen, it's way too big for you to do a tour there, but we can do events." And I was like, you know, did I just hire you or something? Like,
are you my event coordinator now?
Oh yeah, I was like, well, how does this work? And he was like, well, you know, I'm not allowed to really say anything, but if you know, and so he kind of pointed out to me, hey, we can do events, and it was
make it bigger.
Go
bigger, stay home.
It was have people come because you're not allowed to have lounges yet in Alberta, but you are allowed to have an event. And the way the rules work is your event cannot be about consuming cannabis. The event, cannabis consumption has to be ancillary to the event, which means you do it on top of. So you can have a concert, and then you can have a cannabis tent at the concert. So people come to listen to music, then they go and smoke up, and then they come back to listen to the music. And so I was like, amazing. That's what we're going to do. So I have a really good friend of mine, Matt Masters. He runs curbside concerts. I go to him and I was like, hey, man, I want to put on a concert, live event. I want to have a cannabis consumption area. We're going to do all this. Putting on live music is very expensive.
Oh, you found that out too, huh? Yeah.
I did. And so it's like, we got to pivot. And so, you know, again, everything that I do is like, well, what would I want to do? Well, to me, the cross section, when I do, because in my mind, like all of this to me is precursors to lounges. And in my mind, a lounge is not going to be a bar. A lounge in a bar, like that analogy to me doesn't work. Cannabis lounges will not be just bars. To me, you're going to go and you're going to consume cannabis, and then you're going to do something. And the do something is, when I consume cannabis, I like to be creative. And so to me, the intersection between cannabis and creativity is art. And so, and again, sort of a serendipitous thing. Last year, or 2 years ago now, last summer was the first Camp Canna. And I went up there, and the ladies invited me up to do a talk.
Blunts and beans,
talk.
Are you going this August?
I'm going to do my best to get up there. This August, I'm teaching, so I have our final weekend for school. But because that one goes, if anyone's listening, August 18th to 20th. That weekend up in Pine Lake is Camp Canna. So I was up there, doing the talk, and Ian and Val, she runs Kate's Creates. They're a pair of artists, and they actually, Ian prints, he runs his own printing company, and they printed a book of their cannabis photography and art, and they brought it up to me, and they said, and they had signed it, and they wanted to bring it to me, and I just thought, kind of like, oh wow, like, why me? And it's such an amazing book, and I thought, these are really cool people, and we kind of hit it off, and then fast forward, me and Jacob are talking, and he's like, hey, we're going to do this, and I thought, okay, these events, what am I going to do? Well, art. And then it's just like, hey, Val and Ian. So I called them up, and I said, hey, do you guys want to help me put together an art event where we have cannabis at it? And because I know cannabis and you know art, and so we kind of teamed our efforts, and we came up with the concept of the infused art markets. And so then, I've been working with Jacob from the city. It took me over a year of just because there's a lot of hurdles to get over, and it's kind of like, there's a lot of deadlines that you have to meet to put on an event. It takes months, and you just have to be months ahead in your planning. So I didn't meet the deadlines for the first one, but it was just me at the first one when I was trying to put it together. It just didn't come together. But I told Jacob, like, I will put this together. And then that's when I kind of thought, Ian and Val, I contacted them. Then that's when it really started taking off. They started contacting other artists, and then all of a sudden we had a concept, we had a thing. So then, and we planned it for June 24th, which was last month, and we actually pulled it off. They managed. We had 6 artists, and we had 2 artist painters. And because for me, I want people to come down. I want them to see art. I want them to be able to experience art. And but I want them. The original concept was, there's an artist named McKenna Prather, and if you just Google the name McKenna Prather, she's an artist in Calgary. She came when we had at Hempfest a couple years back, because she was the artist in residence formerly at 5 Point, and so she came out for Hempfest, and we had a booth there, and she did her painting, and she is unreal. Like, I have never seen anybody paint like this before. It's spectacular, and she can do it so fast. And so I had her doing that, and people were just stopping all day in front of the booth. And I just thought, what I want to do is just set her up in the middle of the parking lot and put up a whole bunch of easels and chairs, and just have people come in and be like, see if you can do what McKenna does. Because she's like the Bob Ross of painting. I mean, she just, in 20 minutes puts this thing together, and it's like, how did you do that? But I wanted people to come down and and try that and sort of follow along. And then again, when you start out really big like that, it gets really expensive really fast. So well, let's sort of bite off something we can chew, which was a puff and paint concept. I have people come down, I have an artist lead them along. Well, at first the city didn't like the name, because I was going to call it Puff and Paint at the Infused Art Market. The city said, no, you can't call it that, because people will think they can smoke while they're painting. And I was like, okay. So we called it the Infused Art Market with painting at Park Park. And we pulled it off. We had 2 artists, Marissa Javier and Thelia, and they led 2 classes, very, very different classes. But people came and they did it. And we just wanted to sort of test the concept, and it really worked. So it was like, okay, I think we have something here. So we're going to do it again. And now this summer,
when? Give me a date. Give me a date. Come on, Dave.
That day is like, so I'm not allowed to plan anything until after July. But
well, yeah,
September,
you're getting married, so I better keep my mouth shut or I'm gonna get smacked.
oh yeah, July 22nd, I'm getting married. But then September 9th, we are going to do the infused art market again. We're going to try and have 12 artist vendors at this one, and then I want to have 2 paint classes going at one time. I want to get, to me, I want to get as many people together being creative and consuming cannabis as I can, because I think there's something really amazing when you can get groups of people together, so all sort of on the same page, being creative,
Community, my friend. It's all about caring, sharing, and community.
Yes.
Bringing the community together that loves the plant. You can't help but love art and nature once you really start understanding this plant.
Oh yeah, and that's that's because as we've been putting all of this stuff together, like that's just I didn't even have to plan it that way. I just
went to manifested itself.
Oh yeah, I went to the art community and said, hey, what do you guys think of this as an idea? And they were like, we're on board. And artists immediately like, we'll do the lesson.
It's
we'll
like musicians.
Oh yeah, and so I have a great group of people now. I have a great little arts community that we're going to try and grow. And because that's what I want. Again, like I said, I don't see lounges being like bars. I see them being more like a gym, where it's going to be a community of people that come together, for short periods of time. And I want it to be art, is to be the sort of the connective tissue of all of that.
Yeah. And then there's going to be another group, hopefully in Calgary as well, that it'll be something else they focus on. As long as there's that educational content, I'm really, really happy for it. And the consumption of cannabis and creating or alleviating this stigma that has been developed around this plant.
Yeah. Well, the thing that's really nice, I mean, it was a real point of pride for me is that we did the first cannabis consumption tent on public property this year in Calgary. Right? Folk Fest they did it the first. Like, there's always these firsts, and every time there's a first, it moves things along just a little bit. We did the first consumption tent on public property. They had their event earlier this year. That was on private property. But now during the Stampede, like if you go to the Badlands tent, Chinook Cannabis they have a cannabis consumption area at the Badlands tent. That's amazing to see. Cowboys has one. When we do our events, 5 Point Cannabis, they get to outfit our cannabis tent. So, the fact that we have to be in a tent, I don't agree with still, but we're getting there.
It's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, to see events happening, and we have Camp Canna happening. That's going to be amazing. We have our event happening in September. We have cannabis now at the Stampede event. So it's very slowly starting to pick up and starting to, cannabis is starting to not be, for all of us, cannabis has always been. But when we talk about the cannabis industry, sort of the analogy that I've always used is cannabis is like a 15-year-old where it's just starting to be allowed to do things. It's just starting to go out with his friends. So we need to do it properly, and another way of sort of looking at it is, imagine if cannabis was a 16-year-old, okay? And imagine if it was your 16-year-old. And so they've just turned 16, and then today they get their driver's license. And then they come to you and they say, hey, I just got my license. Well, tomorrow I want to drive to Vancouver. And you go, and it's that feeling in your chest. That's what we're up against in cannabis, because it is 100% legal for a 16-year-old to get their license and then drive to Vancouver the next day. But you would say you're not ready for that. And them not being ready for that is your fault. Okay, you had 16 years to prepare that person for driving, which you knew was coming. But it's the same. It's the same mentality of cannabis is now legal, so we all go, okay, great, it's legal. We want to have it at events. We want to be able to go into smoking a bar. We want to be able to consume. We want to be able to buy beverages in the store. And it's that, you're not ready for that. You can't do that. Well, why not? Because cannabis is illegal. No, it's not. Well, but it's that, rather than being a 16-year-old now, it's been 5 years. So I think we're almost an 18-year-old now. But, it is with these events and happening, maybe we're almost a 19-year-old, but things are growing and it is progressing, which is, it makes me
It's
so
slowly
happy
moving in the right direction.
Oh yeah, like it is happening. And then you have Vancouver, or not Vancouver, but BC. They did their white paper called "What We Heard," where the year before they did public. They took in public input on what should a lounge look like. That that white paper came out last year. They have to be putting out a follow up to that soon. Ontario is talking about doing lounges of some sort and just increasing tourism. For the first time, Susan Dupez, she is the head of the Canadian Cannabis Tourism Alliance, which I'm also a part of. But cool. She sent out an update to us, and Discovery Canada, or Destinations Canada, they for the first time when they do their the federal tourism minister, he actually said the words cannabis tourism in an update talking about tourism. It was just one line in the report,
but it was there, baby.
Said it. And that's the thing. They said our name, right? That makes us real. And and so things are moving forward. And it will always feel slow. It's kind of like growing as a child. You're always going to feel like you're a kid. But when you see yourself every day, you don't see the growth. But then someone else is going to see you and go, "Oh wow, this is a lot more." But I see, like 2 years ago or even a year ago, Kananaskis was just me in a van driving people out to the mountains, and now Kananaskis is me and a group of people putting on events. So it is growing. There is this sort of forward momentum, I guess you could call it, which is like it's amazing to see. I knew it was going to come. Like cannabis can't stay bad forever. They can't block it forever.
Well, the thing is we're not that bad of people, and there's so many people of an age now that they can't really ignore that are consuming cannabis. And it's not just about the cannabis, it's the understanding of the endocannabinoid system, which is the education side of it.
Oh yeah. Well, and now, like, people now that are legal, it's been legal since they were 13. So really all of their formidable years, cannabis has been legal. And so we're now, that's why I say we're kind of like 18, 19, like it's grown up a little bit more, I think, because of that. And that, so they will have grown up with, it's not that they will have grown up knowing all this stuff, but they won't have grown up with all of the BS prohibition stuff, saying, you even see one cannabis and you're going to die. And all these overdose talk and all, like, there is none of that anymore. These, but now these kids that have grown up since they were 13 years old, it's been, more and more normalized, which is good, which is, that's the whole point of why I do Kananaskis, is because I want to normalize cannabis use. When I grew up, like, my parents are, my dad is from Saskatchewan he was born in 1944 in Saskatchewan. He was raised in Alberta, and I was raised in BC. But you see, there is that mentality of, like, that's what I was raised in. And so I equated, like, in my mind, heroin and cannabis were the same thing. And the very first time that I ever did cannabis, like, absolutely true story, I was 15 years old. It was in a van parked in front of my house. My brother was having a party with his friends. I snuck into the van with them to smoke up. I 100% thought there was going to be a 50-50 chance that I was going to die.
And yet you took the risk. Why would you do that?
Because I was like, I wanted to try it. I wanted to be cool. I wanted,
because you never saw anybody else actually die from actually.
But in my head, I've been drilled into me that, like, drugs are bad. You'll OD. That was the way I was raised. And I remember I hit it, and this feeling came over me. It was one of the most beautiful feelings in the world. And I just thought, I have been lied to. Like, there's nothing wrong with this. This is a beautiful thing. Everybody should do this. And this will be with me my rest of my life. It was the same as, I remember when I was 5 years old, the very first photo that I ever took. And when my dad, I remember all of the circumstances when he said, "This is how it works, do this." And and then he gave me the photo, and he's like, "Here's the picture you took." And I just was like, "This is what I'm going to do the rest of my life. This is my job. This is me. This is my thing." And
cool.
ever since that day, then I learned what a journalist was and what a photojournalist was, and I'm like, that's all I'm going to be. Like, it's not that I want to be a journalist. I am going to be a journalist. That's it. And it was the same feeling when I tried cannabis for the first time. Was this is my world. Like, this is going to be with me forever. And I'm going to tell as many people as possible that there is nothing wrong with this, that it is a beautiful plant, that only good things come from it, that, you have been lied to if you think it's bad. And so all of that kind of as my whole life. And then when it went legal, it all led to sort of Kananaskis. And I thought, well, I want to help people. I want to educate them. Kind of another reason was, as soon as it goes legal, your friends start calling you and saying, "Hey, you're the guy that knows about cannabis." And I'm like, "Yeah." And they asked me, but people would ask me like the stupidest question.
But hey, there is no stupid question, my friend. There's a lot of stupid answers. There's never a stupid question. If you don't know.
Oh, exactly. Well, that was the thing. And no, they'd say, "Can I just take the cannabis and put it in my food? Is that an edible?" And it's like, what? No, like, that's not how it works. But it was like, do you really, like, tell me how you think? And I found it hilarious, but I realized, like, one of the things about cannabis, everybody knows what cannabis is. Very few people know where it comes from. Very few people know how it actually works. They just know, I light that on fire, I inhale the smoke, and I get high. And it's like, yeah, that's a really rudimentary way of looking at it. But, and it was even people that, you could be a 20-year master grower in the black market and actually know very little about the mechanisms of cannabis. Like when I tell people initially, like, THC is on cannabis, not in cannabis. And they're like, what? I'm like, a trichome. And they're like, what? I thought it was in the plant. And it's like, no, it's not in the plant at all. It's on the plant. And it's only on the plant for a couple of weeks at a time. And it just blows people's mind. And that's why I was kind of like, well, if journalism goes sideways, I could just sit and tell these stories to people. That's what I want to do. So, Kananaskis really was born because, like you and like a lot of people, my goal is to normalize its use. And it's like, I want you to have this information. If there's anything you don't know about cannabis,
take it.
Oh yeah, I will sit for hours and talk. Like, people are like, "Oh, hey man, I'm sorry I asked. I gotta go," because I'm like, no, I'm not done talking yet.
Well, see, you're the perfect guest, Dave, because I just got to wind you up and let you go, man.
Oh yeah, and that's how it was, And so I just it all came together with Kananaskis, but a lot of it is it's just that mindset, and people in the industry, that's one of the best things I think about the cannabis industry is that's how you know people that are actually involved in the cannabis industry is they will go out of their way to show you anything about like, I don't know any cannabis grower that if you said to them, "Hey, can I see your plants?" they would not be like, "Can you?" Like, bring your friends, bring your family, like, bring a sleeping bag. Let's go and see these ladies. That's one of my favorite parts about cannabis. And then when you do the tours, I found that every time I take a group of people out on the tour, I made 10 new friends. At the end of it, and some of the people, they stay in touch, and and we talk about things, and so that's, to me, that's like, I get more out of it than they do.
It's the joy and the happiness of giving and then receiving that gift back, man.
Oh yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, so my goal, I would love to have 500 people all sitting and being creative and consuming cannabis together. Like, that's my goal. I've talked to the city about it. They're on board.
Cool.
It's gonna take a bit to get there. It's still really early days for events. If anybody is listening to this and you're thinking about an event, planning an event, maybe going to do an event, do it and get a cannabis consumption area. Because the more that we do it, the more that it happens, the more normalized that it will be.
Well, and we're finding that there's events popping up all over the place. Like, there was just the Green Gold Games down in Cambridge, Ontario. I know John Burfello is putting something on, or a couple of events this summer in BC. And then we've got the Unicorn Music Festival, which used to be the Unicorn Cup, coming up. What other events are you're going to have yours in another one in September? What other events do you know of?
Well, we're doing the one in September, and then my goal for next year, I want to do it. I'm going to try to do it 6 times next year. Cool. I know there is a couple of golf tournaments that's coming. Also, the ACMLA, the Alberta Cannabis Micro License.
I was hoping you were going to say that.
Yeah. So we have, if anybody here is a micro grower or wants to be a micro grower, look up ACMLA.ca, Alberta Cannabis Micro License Association. We do, and it's going to be September 15th is our 2nd annual golf tournament. That is at the Sylvan Lake Golf and Country Club. That one, we have a meeting tomorrow morning. We're going to talk to the AGLC. We will have a cannabis consumption tent. There is, we like to say we're not allowed to do consumption on the course, but we sort of resort to the old rules, which was what people don't see, they don't know about.
Pretty much, yeah.
Because the first year, when we did it last year, and for a lot of these events, there is no policy and there is no standard, so you have to do it and sort of fumble your way through it. So last year,
it's failing forward and making the rules as you go, and as like you said earlier, it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission.
Well, and that's totally true. But when we did it last year, we actually suspended the liquor license for the course for the day, and that my experience with AGLC is they kind of like doing that for events. Up till now, they liked to completely separate cannabis and alcohol, and so. Last year we suspended the liquor license at the course for the day, and then they allowed the consumption. We still had the tent, but there was sort of the blind eye to the consumption on the course. But this year, so tomorrow morning we're going to be talking to the AGLC, figuring out how we allow the liquor license to continue through the day. Perhaps the clubhouse stays licensed, and we can have the tent outside. Because there is ways to do it. Like, you go to the Stampede grounds, the Badlands tent, that is completely licensed for booze, but there is a cannabis consumption tent in there. So it's, again, AGLC starting to allow things to happen a little bit more. It used to be, there was zero.
Well, we didn't kill anybody yet. And I think they're looking going, okay, well, maybe these guys aren't as bad as we thought they were.
Yeah. And that's my goal. Every time that I work with anybody is maybe cannabis isn't as bad as it is. I do try and always follow the rules. It's one of the things whenever I'm doing events and I'm talking to people, I know people get mad at me all the time and they're like, this guy and his rules and this guy and just always following the rules. But like I say, if you don't give them a reason to get angry at you, then when you go and ask for something more next time, they can't say no. And and it's worked so far. We just keep inching up, but we keep whatever rules you put in place, I will follow them. But I'm going to press my face up against that line. That's always been the way, but it does work. We are getting forward. We are getting events. Unfortunately, I had heard because there was Mary Jane Manor. I've heard that they're not operating anymore. I'm not sure if that's what the case is there. But there is more and more events, and there's also the I wouldn't want to call them underground events, but there's always there's still the the traditional
groups getting together.
Yeah, there's still
groups people getting together.
Because there's the Calgary Cannabis Club. They hold a weekly meeting in a city park with consumption. That's not legal, but that's been going on for the last 100 years. There's Higher Level Yoga. She operates in a plant store here in Southeast Calgary. That's not entirely legal, and it doesn't follow all of the rules. But if you don't push the rules, you're not going to change any of them. So, there is a lot of events that are happening, and there are a lot of people that, when I started doing this in 2018, it was pretty much me. But now when I go to events, I see, there's CJ from Higher Level Yoga, and there's all different. So there's all different people that have sort of kind of now in the scene, and we all try and help each other. We all try and support each other, in any way that I can. I will help people because you have to. I look at being in the cannabis space is kind of like being a Canadian. Whenever I travel, people always say, you Canadians are so nice. Why are you guys like that? And it's like, because there's barely any of us. And so we have to be like this. We need each other. When you go to America, there's tons and tons of Americans. They don't need each other. They could, if you don't get that guy, you can move on to somebody else. But here in Canada, you absolutely need each other. And it's the same in cannabis. If you're trying to do a cannabis event, you need other people doing cannabis events. We absolutely need each other. No one is an island in this.
No. And the more that we do these events, the more that the stigma gets lit up and people go, oh, well, no, that went really smooth. What? That was a cannabis event? Those are people were having fun.
Yeah. Well, and that's what we tried. Like when we did the first one on June 24th, I didn't really advertise it. I used that event as the advertising for the next event. But we had, and I knew there was going to be a ton of foot traffic because it's at Park, which is right across the street from the Hose and Hound on 9th Avenue at 11th Street in Inglewood. So I knew there was going to be a ton of foot traffic, and everybody that walked by, of course, stops and says, "What's this?" And we tell them it's an art event for the cannabis consumption area, and everybody was surprised. Either like, "Oh wow, I didn't expect that," and they were either all for it and said, "Oh great, I want to go and try that," or they didn't care. And and I wanted to gauge the reaction of the neighborhood. Find out what do people really think about this, and it was very positive. Everybody that walked by was, oh hey, I want to try that next time. I want to do that. That's really great to see you doing that. The city inspectors came down and they all you do your follow-up reports with them, and I asked, was there any concerns about this? Can we do this more? And they said, yep, no, nobody had a problem with it. Like police, no concerns. Fire, no concerns. Bylaw, no concerns. So things are moving in the right direction.
Well, and that's fantastic. So how's the rest of Canada doing, or do you really know just how does it look in your eyes for what we're going to be seeing coming at us? I'm hoping, in the next year and a half.
I would say when you look at, this is my opinion, when you look at the cannabis industry, I think that the cannabis tourism is on the right track. It's on the right track in the terms of it's going the right direction. I would say the cannabis industry is not. And I mean, everybody knows about the excise tax issue. I think Tantalus Labs, them shutting down, that should be the canary in the coal mine. To me, that should be the absolute alarm going off where everybody says something needs to change, because something does need to change on the licensing or the LP side. And that's sort of the cannabis industry side. That's not a side that I'm part of.
Right.
But as a tourism operator, I am part of, because without that side, my side doesn't exist. Yeah. Right. And so, I'm so happy to see tourism moving forward and advancing, but it makes me so sad to hear that Dan and the folks at Tantalus are not producing cannabis anymore. Like Harlequin, their CBD strain, that is my fiance's absolutely favorite strain. She is super sad to see. And the fact that an LP is shutting down for any reason should be an alarm in this industry. So, I think overall, I think the government got it. I wouldn't say they got it wrong. I think they did things wrong a lot. I think that politics got in the way of a lot of things. I think greed got in the way of a lot of things. I think that there's people grew way too big, way too fast. Companies were looking to get big. You're either going to get big or you're going to get bought. One of those two things was going to happen. So it was a race to do that rather than
get rich quick scheme.
Yeah, it wasn't a race to make good weed. But the thing about cannabis and the way, I have studied cannabis for 25 years. The history of cannabis is it has only ever worked one way, and that is a ton of small operations all over the world. That's how cannabis has always operated. A lot of dedicated people who love this plant and will do nothing else. And so, the thing is, I'm in this for the long haul in the terms of, if they make cannabis illegal again, I'm still going to do this. And that's how I know that journalism was my true calling, because it's not that I I don't work as a journalist. I am a journalist. I don't know anything else. And you know, it's not that I like to smoke weed. I am a stoner. I don't know anything else. I'm not doing anything else. I have no plans for anything else. And I'm not the only one like this. I know a lot of people who are just like me. And but the fact that that exists in cannabis means that cannabis will be open. You know, and also the fact that there have been laws against cannabis since the mid 1300s. Okay, so that's what 700 years of prohibition, and cannabis usage has not changed at all during that time. So it's not gonna. So really, we just have to, you know, the people that are dedicated to it, the people that love it, and this is who we are and it's our life, we just have to keep going. You know, we just have to like know that not that we're in the right, but we're on the right path. You know, it's the good fight. But just keep trying. Like it's gonna be a hard slog. You know, like when I started Kananaskis, just as one aside, I launched Kananaskis on October 18th, 2018. And when I wrote my business plan and this and that, and I was going to do all this, I said if I don't capture that Christmas season's the market for up till New Year's, like if I don't get that party season for cannabis events, then I've missed the boat and I'll probably have failed. And I did my first tour 2.5 years later. So it's one of those things of like, you know, and a friend told me the business you start is not the business you're going to run. And it's just keep pivoting. So, you know, all the advocates out there and all the people that are you know, in this industry that keep going, like just keep going, keep going. I do think that in the end, like I always look at end games. I think that it's not that we'll win, but like we have to win because we have cannabis. We're going to use cannabis. That's not changing. It's just a matter of whether or not you bring policy in line with us eventually. That's how I see. Eventually, that's what has to happen, and it's just how we get there. There's going to be a roundabout way. But you know, I do think that eventually the government, not that they're going to get it all right, but you know, eventually we're gonna get there.
I think as soon as they stop thinking of it just as on a profit margin and more of a medical thing where they're saving money in other aspects of their medical bills as well, they're going to start coming around. You get those old politicians that have the oh man, that hurts, you know, playing tennis, and give them a joint and they go, huh, yeah, okay, this shit ain't that bad.
Well, and I mean, like, I ain't gonna name names, but there are a number of politicians that I have consumed cannabis with, who the official policy of their party is that they don't support cannabis. You know, and that was leading up to prohibition. And I just think the more and more that we normalize this stuff, then it just becomes more and more and more normalized. And it's you know, if you look back to the 1970s, alcohol was the same as cannabis is now. You couldn't have windows on a bar. You know, there were certain places men and women couldn't be in the same room if alcohol was served. You know, there was all the prohibitions. If people in Calgary, where I live, if you guys want to look up an interesting story, Bottle Screw Bill's was the first bar in the 1970s that actually had a patio because it was illegal. Alcohol could only be consumed indoors and nobody could see it. It was the same rules as cannabis now. You couldn't see that. And it was the Allen family. He moved here from England, and he actually al fresco dining was big there, and so he said, "Hey, I want to do that here." Couldn't do it. He went to the AGLC and was asking to allow him to do it. They finally, you know, they said, "We're protecting you by not allowing you to have that because it'll ruin your business." And he said, "Please allow me to destroy my own business by serving alcohol on a patio." And they went, "If that's what you want to do, fine." And they let him serve. They let him serve alcohol on a patio, and now we have, you know. So it like that's why I don't get disgruntled and I don't get down. You know, when I see how long this takes, you know, because alcohol was in the same place in the 1970s, and now I can take my kid down to the Ship. You can take your kid to the Folk Fest, and you can sit in the beer gardens. You know, like it has grown so much, and I think cannabis will. It's not going to take 40 years. I think it's going to be accelerated a lot. You know, I think within 5 years we're going to have, well, within 2 years we're going to have lounges.
I don't even know if it's going to take that long, brother. I'm hoping it doesn't.
Maybe by next year, we won't have smoking inside because we have 30 years of don't smoke, smoking's bad. All of that education, you're not getting over that in the next 10 years. You're not getting around the WCB rules about employees being around smoke. All of the smoke clubs and all that, they don't have any service or any employees inside those places. I think we may get to that. I see lounges being first. They'll come out, they'll do a new policy, and they'll allow food and beverage to be served in cafes. They'll separate them from bars, so it'll basically be the way I see. The trouble that I see right now is if you allow for, let's say, a coffee shop to sell a cannabis cafe or a cannabis beverage or a cannabis brownie, every single dispensary just became a coffee shop.
Yeah.
And so there, to me, the way I see, and I'm speaking to the government people, they're trying to figure out how to write the policy. But I mean, it's the same. You just need the same rules as alcohol, where you have certain places where you can sell and consume, and you have certain places where you can't. And a dispensary is a place where you sell and you don't consume, but a lounge is a place where you can sell and consume. I mean, like to me, we've already written this stuff for alcohol. So, but it's just a matter of, like, I said that example of the 16-year-old that wants to drive and the parent's not ready. Well, we just have to get society, the more we normalize it, the more everyone becomes a little bit more comfortable, and they say, oh, okay, that's a guy, he smoked a joint. I mean, when you look at Alberta, consumption in public is illegal in Calgary. Consumption in public is legal in Edmonton. Okay? Edmonton has not burned down. Edmonton is still a city. There's not anarchy up there. There's not a scourge of cannabis being consumed. So it's like, okay, so it's possible to have cannabis be consumed in a public place legally by adults and not in the world. So and
but it came so close, though. It seems to come so close.
Yeah. And I think that, so we're going to get these things, once, it does come in sort of leaps, where I think once Vancouver comes out with their policy on what a lounge is going to look like, I see everybody basically copying that, because it is real. There is FOMO. If Vancouver opens up lounges, like Ontario is going to be doing it real fast too, no matter what the Fords say. And because the real thing too is that money talks. If Vancouver opens lounges and it starts making millions of dollars in taxes, everyone's going to do it. That's, so basically the way I see it is we're just waiting for sort of one person to and it's sort of everybody's looking at each other going, are you going to come up with a policy? The Alberta government folks have told us they're not going to do it, that they're essentially waiting for either Vancouver or BC or Ontario to do it first. And everyone has sort of already said that. We're leaving it to them. They're the two biggest ones. Quebec has already removed itself from the conversation. So they're just waiting for those two ones to sort of figure out what's going to happen. And eventually we're going to get, a mayor is going to get elected who, for their entire adult life, it's been legal. So they're going to be like, why is this not legal? Let's just do it. We might get to that point. But it is going to come. It's sort of like if you meet a 9-year-old, eventually they are going to be an 18-year-old. Like that. It's inevitable. Time passes on.
Yeah, and the politicians slowly pass on as well, and we get rid of them and get a new breed in, and then we can get some.
And politicians only
common sense.
They only do what they think we want. And right now they think they have a large enough base that doesn't want cannabis, and but that the base of people that do want it is going to grow, and that's kind of why I'm doing this. Is I'm trying to grow that and showing people, hey, it's actually kind of a good thing.
Well, and like you, remember when you were describing the first time that you consumed in that van, and that first hit, it was like, holy shit, man! I was so wrong for so long, and when you have people walking by and then all of a sudden they're going to try it because they're going to come to your event and they have that type of a reaction, that changes hearts and minds and souls, brother. I really appreciate what you're doing, Dave.
Oh yeah, I mean, I openly invite anybody that does not like cannabis, unless you've tried it and didn't like it, that's fine. Because when I made Kananaskis, and one of the ways that when you apply for the cannabis license through the city, I developed Kananaskis. You do not need to consume to be on my tour at all. You will get the exact same experience on my tour, not consuming cannabis as consuming cannabis. And when you do an event for the city, one of the questions you get asked when you apply for the cannabis license is, if you don't get the cannabis license, will your event still go ahead as planned and go ahead the same? Will anything change if we don't give you this license? If you say yes, they will not give you the license.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things. And so I designed this event, the art event, where people came down and they're like, well, I don't smoke weed. And it's like,
so
you don't need to. And and I invite those people. You want to come down, do art, that's fine. You don't smoke cannabis, totally fine. You don't have to. But I totally invite people that don't like cannabis, that maybe have a stigma in their head, maybe like those are those stoner guys, or like I invite all of those people down. Please come see it. And if you are open-minded enough, try it. And but just see what we're all about. See what this is. Like, see, we're good people. We're happy people. We get along with everybody. I want to get to know you. If you don't want to smoke cannabis, come and make art with me anyway.
Yes. Be expressive, be yourself, and bring joy to this crazy freaking world we live on.
Oh yeah, I mean, and I would say, like, thank you to you for doing things like this, because this is bringing people together, and this is moving cannabis forward. Every single time you do a conversation with somebody, it moves the cannabis industry forward 1 millimeter. And I always tell people, if you move forward 1 millimeter a day, it doesn't seem like much, but in 100 days, you're a centimeter, and then 100 days after that, you're a meter, and 100 days after that, you're a kilometer, and 100 days after that, it all builds up eventually. So, to you, Ken, thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Dave, for that. Like, that means a lot coming from an actual reporter. I was thinking before the interview, I was going, well, do I ask him questions, or does he ask me questions? He's got a lot more experience than I got.
Yeah. Yeah, normally, see, when I'm on the other side of the interview, I barely talk.
But I must have done a fairly good job, because I barely talked.
Yeah, so it's when it's like, okay, but so one thing about me, as soon as you say the word cannabis, it's like, all right, pull up a chair, friend.
Well,
I hope nobody has to be anywhere anytime soon, because I got a lot to say.
I would love to actually have you back talking about the history of cannabis, if you'd be willing to come on to the network, man.
Oh yeah, I mean, I can say, I mean, when I did I had to meet when I did my load card for the event, I had to go meet the fire inspector down at the thing. Because I have the court record of the first Canadian, the George Charbonneau court record. I took that down to show it to him. I was like, hey, because I see people, like, yeah, they might think this is neat. And I just, as soon as I start blathering away, and then all of a sudden he looks at his watch. He's like, "Oh man, I gotta go." And I'm like, "We haven't even done the inspection yet." but we ended up talking like 45 minutes of just like, and I'm like, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. So yes, I would love to talk cannabis history anytime.
Well, we'll definitely be having you back on, Dave. But just hang on. I'm going to end the show, and we'll talk after if you got a minute.
Okay.
Guys, thank you. The chat, you guys are a wonderful blessing to everybody. And remember, it's all caring, sharing community. We have Luna Whitcomb with her, might have a new host on Thursday. We've got Andy and myself on Gardens the Untold Story tomorrow evening. And then the Luna Files. And I said we might have a new host, and we're supposed to have, oh my God, Matt Powers. So everybody knows in this industry, the living soil side, everybody knows who Matt Powers is. And we got him on the channel on Thursday with Luna. So guys, take care, and we'll see you